He kicked me out for losing my job, but he didn't know about my hidden fortune. I remember the exact moment everything changed. The moment my perfectly ordered, predictable life shattered. It was a Tuesday, just like any other, when Tom came into the kitchen, his face serious, his eyes avoiding mine. I was standing by the stove, stirring the soup, the aroma filling the room. I had spent the morning preparing his favorite meal, just like I always did. It was our routine, him coming home from work, us sitting down together to share dinner. Nothing special, nothing out of the ordinary. But this time, everything was different. "Margaret, we need to talk," Tom said, his voice low, hesitant. I looked at him, wiping my hands on the towel, smiling. "What's the matter, Tom? You look like you've seen a ghost." His lips tightened, his eyes flicking nervously to the side. "I've made a decision," he began, his voice trembling slightly. I felt a chill spread through me, though I didn't know why. It was just a feeling, an instinct I couldn't explain. But I wasn't prepared for what he was about to say. "I'm leaving you," he said, his words flat, devoid of any emotion. I froze. The spoon I was holding clattered to the counter, and I stared at him, trying to process what he just said. "What?" I whispered, as if I hadn't heard him right. Tom took a deep breath, running his hand through his hair, like he was trying to gather the courage to say the next part. "I'm leaving you for someone else. Her name is Samantha. She's younger. She makes me feel alive again, Margaret." I couldn't breathe. My heart felt like it was going to stop in my chest. It was as if the ground beneath me had vanished. My mind raced, my thoughts scrambled, but all I could hear was that one phrase repeating over and over. "I'm leaving you for someone else." For a moment, I couldn't even bring myself to speak. My mouth was dry, my hands trembling. But why? What happened, Tom? I could feel my voice breaking, cracking under the weight of it all. "We've been married for 35 years. We've built a life together, our family, our home. Why her? Why now?" Tom's face softened, almost in pity, but it wasn't the look I needed. "I'm sorry, Margaret. I never meant for it to end like this. But I've been feeling trapped, like I've been living in a shell for years. I needed something, someone else." I felt a hot rush of anger flood through me. Trapped. I almost spat the word at him. "You think I wasn't trapped too? You think I didn't sacrifice everything for this family? My dreams, my career, my happiness, all of it for you, for us. And this is how you repay me." Tom's gaze flicked away, like he couldn't handle the intensity of my words. "I never meant for it to get this far, Margaret. It just happened. Samantha, she's different. She makes me feel something. She understands me in a way you never have." His words stung like a slap. Every word he said felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. "So that's it. You just throw everything away for her." "I'm not throwing everything away," he said quickly, his voice strained. "I don't want to hurt you, Margaret, but I can't keep living a lie." "A lie," I repeated, my voice rising. "This is a lie, Tom. 35 years of marriage, raising children together, building a life, and you call it a lie. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had given up everything for him. My career, my freedom, my passions, all of it was sacrificed so we could build something together. And now, he was telling me it was all meaningless. He was telling me that I wasn't enough. My knees went weak, and I sank onto the chair behind me, my hands clasped tightly together to stop the shaking. "I don't understand," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "How could you do this to me, to us?" Tom's face was full of regret, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. "I never wanted to hurt you, Margaret. I didn't want it to end like this. But I can't keep living in this marriage." I shook my head, unable to comprehend what he was saying. "You've already ended it, Tom. You've already made your choice. I don't even know who you are anymore. You're not the man I married." The weight of his words hung in the air, suffocating me. I felt like I was drowning in them. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, was crumbling in front of me. "You're right," he said softly, and for the first time, there was a real sense of sorrow in his voice. "I'm sorry, Margaret. I wish things had been different." I stood up suddenly, my legs shaky as I faced him. Don't you dare feel sorry for me now, Tom. You made your choice. You've thrown away everything for someone else. I don't need your pity. I don't need you." Tom opened his mouth to say something, but I couldn't listen anymore. I turned on my heel and walked away, the tears I had been holding back finally breaking free, streaming down my face as I retreated to the bedroom. I couldn't stop the sobs that racked my body, nor the overwhelming feeling of betrayal that washed over me. All I could think about was how foolish I had been. How long had I been living in this illusion? How had I not seen the signs? How had I allowed myself to become so small in a marriage that was supposed to be my life's greatest achievement? As I sat there, my back against the wall, I realized just how much of myself I had lost. I had given up everything for this marriage, for this family. I had spent so many years playing the role of wife and mother that I had forgotten to be Margaret. The woman I used to be, the woman I wanted to be again. I wiped my eyes, taking deep, shuddering breaths. My thoughts were a chaotic storm of pain and confusion, but one thing became clear in the midst of the wreckage. I had to find a way out of this. Not for him, not for anyone else, but for me. I had to find myself again. The road ahead would be long and painful, but I knew I couldn't keep living in the shadow of what Tom had taken from me. I had given him everything, but now it was time to take back what was mine. I wasn't sure where to begin, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something deep inside me. Hope. The days following Tom's departure blurred together in a haze of grief and loneliness. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, the empty space beside me feeling like a weight that I couldn't shake off. His absence had left such a silence in this house, so thick, so suffocating, that I could hear the echo of every footstep, every breath, as though I was living in a void. I had never imagined being alone like this. Not after everything we had built, after the decades of marriage, after the years of sacrifice. But here I was, facing an empty bed, an empty life. The kitchen, once full of laughter and conversation, now seemed to mock me. There were no more hurried breakfasts before work, no more evenings sitting across from him, sharing the simple comforts of our routine. The house had never felt so cold. I went through the motions of the day, forcing myself out of bed, dragging myself to the kitchen to make coffee, though I had no appetite. I didn't feel hungry, not for food, not for anything. The silence was deafening, and every time I reached for my phone, my fingers hovered over Tom's name. I couldn't bring myself to call him. I couldn't face his voice, his words, the regret that would surely be there, but I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want any more of his apologies. "Mom, are you okay?" Sarah's voice broke through the silence one afternoon, her tone uncertain, like she wasn't sure if it was safe to ask. I sat down at the kitchen table, the phone in my hand, staring at the screen. "I'm fine, Sarah," I lied, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "Just getting used to the quiet." Her sigh on the other end of the line was heavy. "I wish I could be there more, Mom. I know it's tough, but we're here. You know that, right?" "Yeah," I whispered. "I know." But the truth was, she wasn't here. Neither of them was. Sarah, busy with her own life, her own struggles, had drifted away over the years. And Daniel, well, he was living his life too. I hadn't seen him in weeks. I had raised them, loved them, given everything to make sure they had a future. And yet now, when I needed them most, they were distant. I understood. They had their own lives to lead. But the pain of it, the pain of feeling so invisible, so alone, was unbearable. I hung up after a few more words, but the conversation left me feeling more isolated. I wasn't angry at them, not really. I was angry at myself. What had I done? What was I still doing? I had spent my entire life living for others, and now I was faced with the question I had been avoiding. Who was I, really? I spent the next few days in a kind of numb haze, my thoughts consumed by Tom's betrayal, by the emptiness of my life without him. My mornings bled into afternoons, the hours stretching endlessly. I couldn't focus on anything, couldn't find the energy to care. But then something shifted. It was a Saturday morning, the first sunny day in what felt like forever. I woke up early, the sunlight streaming through the window, casting long shadows across the room. The house felt a little less cold, a little less empty. I didn't know what it was, maybe the warmth of the sun, or the stillness of the moment. But I felt something stir inside me, something faint, but undeniable. I stood up, stretched, and went to the closet. I pulled out an old pair of sneakers, the ones I used to wear for long walks before life became too busy. I hadn't walked in months, maybe more, but I decided right then and there that I would take that first step. For myself, not for Tom, not for my children, for me. The air was cool but refreshing as I stepped outside, and I began walking. The rhythmic sound of my shoes on the pavement was grounding. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about Tom or the betrayal. I was just walking. I let my mind wander, letting go of the weight of my thoughts. As I passed the park, I saw children playing, their laughter filling the air, and for a brief moment, I felt a flicker of something like peace. I had been so consumed by my pain, so absorbed in the hole Tom had left in me, that I had forgotten how to just be. When I returned home, I felt a small sense of accomplishment. It wasn't much. It wasn't a cure for my loneliness or the heartbreak, but it was a start. I spent the next few days doing more of the same, walking, reading, journaling. Little by little, I began to reclaim bits of myself I had lost. I took long walks in the park, letting my mind wander, releasing my grief with every step. I bought a journal and began writing again, something I hadn't done in years. I had forgotten how therapeutic it was to put my thoughts down on paper, to see them in front of me, raw and real. One evening, Elaine called me. Her voice was warm, but I could hear the concern in it. "Margaret, I know it's been hard, but I want you to know you're not alone. You've been so strong for so long, but it's okay to lean on people now. You don't have to carry all of this by yourself." I sat down on the couch, the weight of her words sinking in. "I don't even know who I am anymore, Elaine. I've spent so many years living for Tom, for the kids. I don't know how to live for me. You're still you, Margaret. You just have to remember her. She's still there, buried under all the hurt, but she's there. You just need to dig deep and find her again." Her words lingered with me long after we hung up. I realized something that night. I had spent so long taking care of everyone else that I had forgotten to take care of myself. I had sacrificed my own dreams, my own desires, for the sake of family, for the sake of being the perfect wife and mother. But who had I been in all that? I was so lost in the roles I played that I had forgotten to ask myself what I wanted. I was starting to see glimpses of the woman I once was, the woman who had dreams, who had passions outside of her family. She was still there. She hadn't disappeared. She had just been buried, covered by years of expectations and sacrifices. And I was ready to find her again. The days began to get easier, not because the pain had gone away, but because I was starting to take control. Little by little, I was reclaiming parts of myself that had been lost. I wasn't sure where this journey would take me, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I could learn to live for me again. The days seemed to pass in a blur, each one feeling like the last. But something inside me began to stir, a quiet yearning I couldn't ignore. Maybe it was the stillness, the absence of Tom's presence, or perhaps it was something deeper, something I had buried for years. I wasn't sure what it was, but I felt a shift, a subtle push forward. One afternoon, after a long walk, I found myself standing in front of a painting studio I'd passed countless times, but never entered. The sign outside, "Beginner Painting Class," caught my attention. I hadn't picked up a paintbrush in years. It used to be my escape, my way of expressing myself when words failed me. But somewhere along the way, I had put it aside. I didn't know why. Life had just taken over. I stood there, the weight of my decision pressing down on me, unsure of what I was about to do. But in that moment, something deep within me whispered, "Do it. For yourself." I walked inside. The air smelled of oil paint and creativity, the walls lined with colorful canvases, each one telling a story. The instructor, a warm woman with kind eyes, greeted me with a smile. "First time?" she asked. "Yes," I replied, my voice uncertain but excited. "I used to paint, but it's been a long time." "Well, you're in the right place," she said, leading me to an easel. The best part of painting is letting go of expectations. Just let the brush move and see what comes. As I dipped the brush into the vibrant blue paint, I felt a rush of freedom, as if I was reconnecting with a part of myself I had long neglected. The strokes felt clumsy at first, but then something clicked. The paint seemed to speak to me, releasing something within that I had kept hidden for far too long. I hadn't realized how much I needed this, how much I needed me. That night, as I sat in my living room, the sounds of the world outside dimmed by the weight of my thoughts, I grabbed my journal from the drawer. I hadn't written in it for months, perhaps longer. But tonight, the words came easier. I feel like I'm waking up from a long sleep. There's a part of me that's been lost, buried under the years, the expectations, the sacrifices. But today, I found her again. I don't know where this will lead, but I'm ready to explore it. I closed the journal and leaned back, a sense of peace settling over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something for myself, something that wasn't dictated by the needs of others. The next day, I called Elaine. I hadn't seen her much since Tom left. She had been my rock, always there when I needed her, but I hadn't wanted to burden her with my grief. Still, something told me I needed to talk to her, to share what I had been feeling. "Elaine, can you come over?" I asked when she picked up the phone. "I have something to tell you." "I'll be there in an hour," she said without hesitation. When she arrived, I was sitting at the kitchen table, a mug of tea in front of me, my journal lying open. She could see the change in me. She always could. "What's going on, Margaret?" she asked, sitting across from me. "You're different. I can see it in your eyes." I took a deep breath and smiled. "I've started painting again, and I joined a book club. I'm writing in my journal. I don't know, it's like I'm finally waking up. Like I'm finding pieces of myself I forgot about." Elaine's eyes softened, and she reached across the table, placing her hand on mine. "I knew it. I knew you would find your way back. You're stronger than you think, Margaret, and you deserve to be happy. You've spent so many years living for others. It's time for you to live for you." I looked down at my hands, feeling the weight of her words. I don't know who I am anymore. I've been so caught up in being Tom's wife, Sarah, and Daniel's mother. I don't remember the woman I was before all of that. Elaine squeezed my hand. You're still her. She's always been there, waiting to be found. And she's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Tears stung my eyes, but this time, they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of relief, of release. I had spent so much time mourning the woman I thought I had lost, but maybe, just maybe, I had only hidden her away. Now, I was slowly bringing her back. The weeks passed, and I continued to explore this new part of myself. I spent hours in the studio, painting my emotions onto the canvas, letting go of the hurt and anger I had been carrying for so long. I met new people in the book club, women who were kind and open, sharing their own stories, their own journeys. I realized that, just like me, they were all seeking something more, something deeper. It was a reminder that I wasn't alone in my struggle. One evening, as I sat in the cozy corner of my living room, a book in my lap, I felt a calm I hadn't felt in ages. My mind was clear, my heart at peace. For the first time, I could hear my own thoughts, my own desires, without the constant noise of other people's expectations. I had started to believe in myself again. Not as Tom's wife, not as Sarah and Daniel's mother, but as me. I could feel the shift, the quiet strength building inside me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. Elaine came over again a week later, and this time, I was ready to show her something. I had been working on a new painting, one that felt different from anything I'd ever created before. I wasn't sure why, but it felt important. I set it on the easel and turned it toward her. Elaine's eyes widened as she took in the colors, the strokes. Margaret, this is beautiful. It's like you've poured yourself into it. I nodded, my fingers brushing the paint as I stood beside her. I think I have. It's me, Elaine. It's who I am now. The woman I've always been, underneath all the layers of life and sacrifice. She smiled, her eyes filled with pride. You're incredible, Margaret. I always knew you had it in you. You just needed to find her again. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words sink in. I had found her. I had found the woman I was always meant to be. And for the first time, I didn't need anyone else to validate that. I was enough. As I looked at the painting, I realized that this was just the beginning. There was so much more to discover, so much more to create, so much more to live. I wasn't finished. I was just getting started. I sat in front of my computer, staring at the blank screen. It had been a few weeks since I'd started this journey, this path of rediscovery, and though the steps had been small, they felt significant. Still, there was something missing. I wasn't sure what, but a nagging feeling kept growing inside me. I wanted more. I needed more. I had spent the last few years doing everything for everyone else. But now, I was finally starting to realize that I couldn't wait for life to come to me. I couldn't keep pretending that I was okay, just sitting here, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. I had to make it happen. For myself. I opened a new tab and typed in part-time jobs. My heart raced a little. I hadn't worked in years. I had spent most of my time being a mother, a wife, running the house. But now I needed something for me. Something that would give me a sense of purpose beyond what I had been. I scrolled through the listings, but nothing really caught my eye. I knew it wouldn't be easy to find a job, but that wasn't the point. The point was that I was trying. I was trying to reclaim a piece of myself that I thought had disappeared. I closed the computer and sat back, looking out the window. The garden outside had begun to bloom. I could hear the birds chirping, the wind rustling through the leaves. The world outside was alive, vibrant. And for the first time, I realized something. I could be that vibrant. I could be alive again. But I had to take the first step. I grabbed my purse and walked out the door. The first place I went to was a small bookstore in town. The kind of place you'd stumble upon and instantly fall in love with stacks of books in every corner, the smell of old paper and coffee in the air. I asked the woman behind the counter if they were hiring, my hands shaking slightly as I spoke. She looked at me for a moment, her eyes scanning my face, before nodding. "We could use some help," she said with a soft smile. "Come by tomorrow. We'll talk more." I walked out of the bookstore, a smile tugging at the corners of my lips. I had taken the first step. It was small, but it felt like a victory. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but think about what I had done. It wasn't much, but it was something. And maybe, just maybe, it would be the start of something bigger. Something for me. Something that wasn't tied to anyone else. The next few days passed quickly. I kept thinking about the bookstore job, but I also began to consider something else. Something bigger. I had always wanted to travel. For years, I had put it off, telling myself that there was always something more important: Tom's work schedule, the kids' school activities, the house. But now, there was no reason to wait. I sat at the kitchen table one evening, a map of the world spread out in front of me. Italy. I had always dreamed of going to Italy. The food, the art, the history. It had always seemed like something that was just out of reach, something I'd put off for later. But now, later felt like it was never coming. I picked up the phone and called Elaine. "Hey, it's me," I said, trying to hide the excitement in my voice. "I've been thinking. Maybe it's time I take that trip I've always wanted. Maybe Italy. I've never been, and it's something I've always dreamed about." There was a pause on the other end. Then Elaine's voice filled with warmth. "Margaret, that sounds amazing. You deserve it. You've spent so many years taking care of everyone else. It's your time now. Go." I smiled. "I'm scared, though. It's a big step, and I've never traveled alone." "That's the beauty of it," she replied. "You'll find parts of yourself you didn't even know you had. Trust me, it's worth it. Don't let fear hold you back." I sat back in my chair, the weight of her words sinking in. She was right. I had been afraid of so many things, afraid of stepping out on my own, afraid of being alone. But now, I realized that the only thing holding me back was myself. I had spent too long waiting for permission to live my life. It was time to stop waiting. The following days were a whirlwind of planning. I booked the flight to Italy, something that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. I researched everything: places to stay, things to see, foods to try. I felt like a different person, a woman who was taking control of her destiny. I kept the news to myself at first. I wasn't ready to share it with Sarah or Daniel. I knew they would support me, but I wasn't sure how they would feel about me going so far away, alone. And honestly, I wasn't sure how I felt about it either. But I was doing it. I was taking that leap.
The first night, I sat down to write in my journal after booking the trip. I felt a strange sense of peace. The words came easily this time. I'm scared, but I'm doing it. I'm going to Italy. I'm going to see the world, and I'm going to do it on my terms. No one else. It's time for me to live again. I closed the journal and stared at the empty page in front of me, realizing that the blank spaces on the page were just like the blank spaces in my life. There were so many possibilities ahead of me, so many things I could fill those spaces with. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. Elaine called me the next morning, her voice full of excitement. I can't believe you're actually going. I'm so proud of you, Margaret. You're going to have the time of your life. I'm still scared, I admitted, pacing the living room. It feels like I'm doing something completely crazy. No, you're not, she said firmly. You're doing something brave. You're reclaiming your life, Margaret. You've got this. I smiled, a feeling of warmth spreading through me. You're right. I've got this. As I hung up the phone, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't holding back. I was stepping into my own future, one that was full of possibility. I wasn't just living for others anymore. I was living for me, and it felt incredible. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of preparation. I packed my bags, arranged my accommodations, and researched every little detail about the places I wanted to see. Italy wasn't just a destination anymore. It was a symbol of everything I was becoming. A symbol of independence, of strength, of me. As the date of my departure grew closer, I could feel the excitement bubbling up inside me. The fear was still there, of course, but it was overshadowed by the anticipation. I was ready for this. I was ready to step into a new chapter of my life. And when the day finally arrived, I didn't look back. I boarded that plane with the kind of excitement I hadn't felt in years, ready to embrace the world on my own terms. The journey ahead was mine to take, and for the first time, I was taking it. Alone, but no longer afraid. I wasn't expecting to see him. I had agreed to come to this gathering on a whim, really. Elaine had insisted, her voice full of that infectious enthusiasm she always carried, convincing me that it would do me good to socialize, to step out of my comfort zone. And so, Here I was, standing in the corner of a room full of people I barely knew, holding a glass of wine, watching conversations unfold around me like scenes in a movie. And then there he was. Tom. I felt my stomach tighten at the sight of him. He was laughing, his arm around her, Samantha, the woman he left me for. I didn't know why, but seeing them together, his hand resting casually on her shoulder, felt like a punch to the gut. She was younger, more vibrant, everything I wasn't at that moment. But that wasn't the worst of it. It was his face, the way he smiled, that smile that used to be reserved for me. It wasn't genuine, it was smug, like he thought everything was fine, like nothing had changed. He didn't even seem to notice me standing there, his eyes drifting over me without a second glance. I wanted to look away, to leave, but I didn't. I stayed watching him, watching them, and then he saw me. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a split second, I saw a flash of something in his face, guilt, maybe. But it was gone just as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by that same indifferent smile. Margaret, he said, walking toward me, his voice too casual. I didn't expect to see you here. I could feel the tension building in my chest, the urge to shout at him, to demand answers. But I didn't. I held my ground, keeping my expression neutral, my voice steady. It's a party, Tom. It's not exactly a surprise. He chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. I guess you're right. He shifted, standing just a little too close, but I didn't move. This is Samantha, he said, gesturing to the woman beside him. She smiled at me, and I could see the faintest flicker of something in her eyes, something that almost felt like pity. I didn't know whether I should hate her or feel sorry for her, but I just stood there, my hands clenched at my sides. I'm sure you've heard a lot about me, she said with a tone that was too sweet, too rehearsed. I forced a smile back, nodding, but saying nothing. Tom's gaze lingered on me for a moment longer than necessary. So, he said, his voice taking on a more familiar tone, how have you been? How have I been? The question hung in the air like a mockery. How have I been? Let's see. I've been betrayed. I've been discarded. I've been picking up the pieces of a life that I thought I knew. But none of that escaped my lips. Instead, I simply shrugged, my face impassive. I'm fine, Tom. There was a long, awkward pause. I could feel his eyes on me, like he was trying to gauge whether I was going to break down, whether I'd crumble under the weight of everything he'd done. But I wasn't the same woman who had stood in this room, crying, pleading for him to come back. That woman was gone. I was different now. Margaret, listen, he started, his voice softening, almost pleading. I know things ended badly, but I was hoping maybe we could talk sometime. You know, catch up. Maybe be friends. The word friends hung in the air like a weight I couldn't bear. Friends. It was laughable. The man who had torn my world apart was standing in front of me, asking if we could still be friends, like we could just pick up where we left off, like everything was fine. I stared at him, my mind swirling with 1,000 emotions. But I forced myself to speak with the calmness I'd learned over the past few months. "No, Tom," I said, my voice firm. "I don't think that's a good idea." He blinked, as though surprised by my response, but quickly masked it with another smile. "Well, if you change your mind," he trailed off, his gaze flicking briefly to Samantha before looking back at me. "You know where to find me." "I don't think I'll be needing that," I replied, my words cool, my resolve hardening with every passing second. I felt a surge of something inside me, something that was no longer anger, but strength. I had spent so many years letting him control the narrative of my life, letting his decisions shape who I was, how I felt. But not anymore. "I think it's time for me to go," I said, my voice steady, unwavering. "I'll see myself out." Tom opened his mouth to say something else, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned away, walking out of the conversation, out of the room, out of the life I once shared with him. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard Tom call my name, but I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had already left him behind. I didn't know why I had felt so calm. Maybe it was because, in that moment, I realized something. Tom no longer had any power over me. I stood in the hallway, taking a deep breath, feeling the weight of it all lift off my shoulders. I had faced him. I had faced the man who had shattered my world, and I hadn't flinched. I hadn't cried. I hadn't begged. I had simply walked away. I could feel my pulse in my throat, the realization settling into me. I was free. I was finally free. I stepped outside, the cool night air rushing past me, as though the world was welcoming me back. For the first time in a long time, I felt the warmth of my own strength. I had walked away, and I hadn't looked back. As I stood in the silence of the night, I realized that this moment, this encounter with Tom, was everything I needed. It was the final confirmation that I had moved on. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need his presence. I had everything I needed within me. I was enough, and I was finally ready to live for myself. The phone rang just as I was finishing my morning coffee. I glanced at the screen and saw Sarah's name. My heart fluttered, an instinctive smile tugging at my lips. It had been a while since we'd talked, just the two of us, without the distraction of family chaos or life's busy demands. I swiped to answer, trying to keep my voice light. "Hey, Sarah, how's everything going?" There was a pause on the other end of the line before I heard her voice, soft, hesitant, but laced with excitement. "Mom, I have something to tell you." I sat up straighter, suddenly alert, sensing the shift in her tone. "What's going on? You sound serious." She laughed, but it wasn't her usual carefree laugh. It was different. "I'm pregnant, Mom." The words landed like a soft bomb, and for a moment, everything went still. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't the shock, not really. I had suspected something. The way Sarah had been acting lately, a little quieter, a little more distant, but hearing it from her mouth, it felt like an earthquake inside my chest. "Oh my God," I whispered, my hand gripping the edge of the counter, my legs weak. "You're Sarah, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you." She laughed again, but there was something in her voice that made me pause, something I couldn't quite place. "Thanks, Mom. I just wanted you to know. I've been scared, and I don't know what to expect, but I thought you'd be happy." "I am, honey, I really am." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "It's just, I wasn't expecting this." There was a long silence before she spoke again, her voice softer now, more vulnerable. "I don't know if I'm ready, Mom. I don't know if I can do this." I leaned against the counter, staring out the window as a wave of emotions flooded over me. I could feel my heart swell with joy for her, but also a pang of something deeper, something I couldn't quite define. Nostalgia, maybe. Years of raising my own children, sacrificing everything to be there for them, to make sure they had everything they needed. And now, I was about to be a grandmother. The cycle was starting again, and it felt like the weight of it all was finally catching up to me. "You'll be okay, Sarah," I said softly, my voice steadier now. "You'll figure it out, just like I did. I know you're scared, but you're stronger than you think. And no matter what, I'll be here for you. Always." There was a long pause on the other end, and then she whispered, "Thanks, Mom." We talked for a little while longer, but it wasn't until I hung up that I felt the full impact of what she had said. My mind kept replaying the words, "I'm pregnant." I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was going to be a grandmother. It was like a switch had flipped in me, and suddenly everything felt different. I leaned back against the counter, my hand still gripping the edge. The news of Sarah's pregnancy stirred something inside me, something deep and buried under years of living for everyone else. The idea of being a grandmother felt profound, but it also felt like an awakening. I had spent so much of my life focused on being a wife, being a mother. Those roles had consumed me. I had given everything to my family, and somewhere along the way, I had lost myself. But now, as I thought about my future, I realized something. I wanted to be a grandmother who was present, who was strong, who didn't just exist, but lived fully. I didn't want to be the passive observer of life. I wanted to show my grandchildren what it meant to live with purpose, to live with joy, to be someone they could look up to. I walked over to the living room and sank into the couch, staring out the window. The weight of the world seemed lighter today. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a future that wasn't defined by my past. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was about to become a new version of myself. The next few days were a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah and what her pregnancy meant for both of us. I was going to be a grandmother. I wanted to be there for her, to help her, but I also knew that I had to be strong. I had to show her that it was possible to embrace this new chapter with grace and confidence, even when the world felt uncertain. I called Elaine that afternoon, needing to share my thoughts, to process everything. Elaine, I just spoke to Sarah, I began, my voice shaky, with a mixture of excitement and something else. She's pregnant. There was a long pause on the other end before Elaine responded, her voice warm with understanding. Oh, Margaret, that's wonderful news. I can feel your joy, but I sense there's more. I laughed, though it was more of a breathless exhale. It's just, everything feels different now. I'm going to be a grandmother, and I don't know if I'm ready for that. I've spent so many years thinking about being a mom, I didn't think about what would come next. Elaine's voice softened, full of wisdom. You've been a mother for so long, Margaret. You've given so much of yourself to your children. But now, you're going to be something else. You're going to be a role model. You're going to show Sarah what it means to live with strength and grace, even when life throws curveballs. It's your time to live for you too. Her words resonated deep inside me. She was right. It was my time now. My time to embrace this next phase of my life with the same strength I had always carried, but this time with the freedom to live for myself, too. A few days later, I took a walk through the park, the cool breeze brushing against my face as I walked along the familiar path. My thoughts were clearer now. I wasn't just going to be a grandmother. I was going to be a grandmother who was present, who was strong, who was independent. I was going to live a life full of purpose, just as I had always wanted. When I got home, I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my journal. I wrote down my thoughts, my feelings, pouring everything onto the page. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this. I'm not done yet. I'm just getting started. I'm going to be the best grandmother I can be, present, strong, independent. I'm going to show Sarah and my grandchildren what it means to live with purpose. And I'm going to do it on my terms. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace, a sense of direction. The past was behind me, and the future, it was mine to shape. And with that, I took my first step toward a life that was truly mine. I boarded the plane with a mix of excitement and nerves, but mostly a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. Italy. It had always been a dream, something I told myself I would do someday. But someday had always been just out of reach, tethered to the obligations of family, of being the wife, the mother, the one who always put others first. Now I was doing it. I was finally living for me. The flight felt like a blur. I barely slept, my mind racing with thoughts of what was ahead. But when I stepped off the plane in Rome, something clicked. The air was different, lighter, almost electric with possibility. I wasn't just a tourist here. I wasn't just Margaret, wife, mother, and all the labels I had carried for so long. Here, in this foreign place, I was just me, a woman on her own, discovering herself again. I took a taxi to my hotel, the city unfolding around me like a dream. The cobblestone streets, the ancient buildings, the bustle of life in a place so far removed from everything I'd known. As I checked into the hotel, the receptionist handed me a key with a warm smile. "Welcome to Rome," she said. "I hope you enjoy your stay." For a moment, I simply stood there, the weight of the words sinking in. Enjoy your stay. Not for anyone else. Not as a mother or a wife. Just me. I wandered through the streets that evening, marveling at the sights, at the simple beauty of it all. I felt an unfamiliar freedom, a lightness in my chest I hadn't realized I was missing. Every step I took, I felt more connected to myself, to this woman I had neglected for so long. I wasn't alone in the way I had feared. I was free. I stopped at a small cafe, sat down with a glass of wine, and watched the world go by. There was something about being here, surrounded by strangers, that felt so right. No one knew me. No one expected anything from me. It was just me, the wine, and the hum of the city. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. The next few days were a whirlwind of exploration. I visited the Colosseum, wandered through the Vatican, and got lost in the narrow streets of Trastevere. Everywhere I went, I saw something new, something that made my heart race with the excitement of discovery. But the most important discovery was the one I made within myself. I had spent so many years living for others, for my family, for Tom. But here, I was learning to live for me. I couldn't help but think about what this trip meant. It was a milestone, a turning point. I wasn't just exploring a new city. I was exploring myself, and I was starting to understand something profound. I didn't need anyone else's validation to be happy. Not Tom, not anyone's. I had spent so many years wondering if I was enough. I had spent so long waiting for approval, for recognition, for love. But I realized that I had been looking in all the wrong places. The love I was seeking, the validation I craved, it was already inside me. I just needed to remember that I was enough. It was the 4th day of my trip when I got the call. I had just returned to my hotel room after a day of sightseeing when my phone rang. The number on the screen made my stomach drop. Tom. I hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing on me. But I answered. Margaret, his voice came through the line, hesitant, almost too casual. How are you? I felt a chill run down my spine, but I kept my voice steady. I'm good, Tom. Just enjoying my trip. There was a pause, and I could hear the faint sound of his breathing on the other end. I've been thinking about you, he said, his voice lower now, almost apologetic. About everything. About us. I miss you, Margaret. I made a mistake. I closed my eyes, feeling a rush of emotions flood through me. For so long, I had wanted to hear those words, wanted him to admit that he had messed up, that he regretted leaving me. But now, I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. I wasn't sure if it even mattered. You miss me, I said, my voice calm but firm. You've had months to think about this, Tom. You've had all the time in the world, and you left. You made your choice. I know, he replied quickly, and I regret it. I was wrong. I was selfish. But maybe we can work things out. Maybe we can still have a future together. I felt a sudden wave of anger rise up in me, but I didn't let it take over. Instead, I took a deep breath, finding my calm. Tom, no, I don't think we can. I'm not that woman anymore. I'm not the woman you left behind. I've moved on. I could hear the sharp intake of his breath on the other end. What do you mean you've moved on? You're on a trip, for God's sake. You're just running away. Running away, I repeated, a quiet laugh escaping my lips. No, Tom, I'm not running. I'm living. For the first time in my life, I'm doing things for me. I'm learning who I am again. And I don't need you to define me. I don't need you to save me. Margaret, I'm sorry, he said, his voice strained. I didn't mean to hurt you. I've realized so much about myself, about what I've lost. I want to fix it. You can't fix this, I said softly, my words deliberate, measured. What's broken can't be fixed, Tom. And honestly, I don't want it fixed. I've found peace in my own company. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need you. There was silence on the other end, and I could feel the weight of the moment hanging between us. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence with anything. I didn't need to beg, to explain myself. I had already made up my mind. Goodbye, Tom, I said quietly, my voice steady. I wish you well, but I'm moving on, for real this time. I didn't wait for him to respond. I ended the call and sat there for a moment, letting the silence settle in. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I felt free. I stood up, walking to the window, looking out at the sprawling city below me. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the ancient buildings. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with myself. I didn't need Tom anymore. I didn't need his approval. I had found something much more valuable than his love or his apology. I had found my own strength, and for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. I stood at the doorway of my home, the place that had once been the center of my world, and felt something shift inside me. It wasn't a wave of nostalgia or longing. It was something else, something deeper. This house, this life I had once built with Tom, had been a cocoon, sheltering me from the world outside. But now I realized I had outgrown it. I had outgrown who I was when I walked through that door just a few months ago. I hadn't even realized how much had changed until this very moment. The quiet felt different. The silence wasn't oppressive like it once was. It was peaceful. I set my bag down on the entryway table, the familiar scent of home, wood, lavender, and a hint of old leather filling my senses. Everything looked the same. The walls, once covered with family photos, now stood bare, except for a few frames I'd kept. It wasn't just the house that had changed, but me. I took a deep breath, a wave of calmness washing over me. I had spent so many years running from the truth of who I was, believing I was nothing without my roles as a wife, a mother, a grandmother. But now, I realized that those roles were just parts of the whole, pieces of the puzzle. Yes, but not the entire picture. I was Margaret, and that was enough. Later that evening, Sarah called. I could tell by her voice that she was excited, but there was something else, an uncertainty, a hesitation. We hadn't talked much since I returned from Italy, both of us caught in the whirlwind of life. "Mom," she said, her voice tentative, "I've been thinking a lot about you lately." I smiled softly, leaning back against the couch. "I've been thinking about you too. What's going on, honey?" She paused before answering, almost as if trying to find the right words. "I just wanted to tell you how much I've learned from you. I've seen you change. I see you living again. It's like you've become this whole new person, and I admire that, Mom. I really do." I felt my chest tighten, a lump forming in my throat. It wasn't just the words, but the tone behind them. I realized that my transformation wasn't just for me, it had rippled outward, touching my children in ways I hadn't expected. Sarah had seen me struggle. She had watched me suffer, but she was now seeing me rise, stronger than before. "I'm proud of you, Sarah," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You've always been strong, and I'm glad you see that in me now. I guess we're both learning to live in new ways, aren't we?" Her voice softened, and I could almost hear the smile in it. "Yeah, I guess we are." As we hung up, I felt a quiet satisfaction. I wasn't the mother I once was. I didn't need to be. The woman I had become, independent, strong, self-assured, was the mother Sarah needed. And I could feel deep inside that I was ready to offer her something more than advice. I was ready to be an example. A few days later, Daniel called. We hadn't spoken much either, but there was a noticeable change in his tone. "Hey, Mom, I've been meaning to check in with you. I know we've both been busy, but I've been thinking a lot about what's been going on. And I just want to say I'm proud of you. Really proud." His words hit me harder than I expected, a sharp pang of emotion in my chest. Daniel had always been the quiet one, the one who kept his feelings to himself. But hearing him say that, it felt like a full circle moment. He had seen my transformation, too. "I'm proud of you too, Daniel," I said softly, my voice full of tenderness. "You've always been there for me, even when I didn't know how to ask. And now, I think we're both figuring out what it means to really live on our own terms." We spoke for a while longer, catching up on the little things, on life. I listened closely, appreciating the moment of connection, realizing that my relationship with my children had shifted too. I wasn't just their mother anymore. I was someone they could respect, someone they could learn from. The following weekend, I took a walk through the park. It was a bright Saturday afternoon, and the sun was shining through the trees, casting long shadows on the path. It had been a while since I had taken time for myself like this, time to just think, to breathe, to be. I walked slowly, feeling the cool breeze on my skin, watching the families around me, the children running, the elderly couples holding hands, the mothers and fathers pushing strollers. It felt like the world was moving on without me, but in a way that made me feel connected to it, not separate from it. I found a bench by the pond and sat down, taking in the beauty around me. I watched the ducks glide across the water, the sunlight dancing on the surface. I felt at peace, and I realized that this was the life I had fought for. Not just the life of being someone's wife or mother, but my own life. A life where I could choose my path, where I could embrace each day with purpose. As I sat there, I couldn't help but smile. I wasn't just waiting anymore. I wasn't waiting for things to happen. I was making them happen. I had learned to trust myself, to listen to my own voice, to take the next step without fear. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scared. Later that day, I began making plans. Real plans. Not just about my career or my family, but for me. I pulled out my journal, the pages still fresh with the thoughts I had poured out in Italy. I began to write down my dreams, my hopes, the things I wanted to experience. I had always put things off for later, but later wasn't enough anymore. I was going to travel. I was going to visit places I'd always dreamed of. I was going to take up new hobbies, learn new things. I was going to make my life the adventure I had always wanted it to be. And then I thought about the future. My future. I didn't know what it would look like, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I was excited for it. The possibilities seemed endless. A week later, I stood in front of the mirror, looking at the woman who had returned. She was familiar, but somehow different. Stronger, more confident, more at peace. The transformation wasn't just external, it was inside. I had fought for this. I had earned it. I wasn't defined by my past anymore. I wasn't defined by my relationships or my roles. I was defined by who I was in this moment. And in this moment, I was ready to face whatever came next. Because now, I knew I could handle anything. The woman who stood in front of that mirror was someone who had come through the storm, who had weathered the hardest parts of her life and was still standing tall. I was ready for the future, and I knew that, whatever it held, it would be mine to shape.